Now 250,000. Now, but to get 275. High, but to get 275. 3. Now 300,000. Now 3 1/4, 325. High, but to get 3 1/4, but to get 325. Now half. Now, but to get 300. And hello and greetings from the heart of America in Dallas, Texas, at Lincoln Center, at the great intersection of the LBJ Freeway and the North Dallas Tollway. Mike McGavel Jones here, and we've got a show for you today. We're going to talk about a couple of different things. Zach, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Mike. How are you?
I'm good.
Let me tell you, I'm staying busy. This Monday has got me going. It's cold outside, it's windy, and I have no shortage of work. How about yourself?
Yeah, it is. Craziest weather, you know.
Yeah.
Now, it's not unusual to get this in the fall in most places, but in Dallas, we probably had, we talked about this before about how much rain we've gotten, but good grief, it rained all night. It's rained all morning. It's drizzling right now. And so, anyway, weather's kind of crazy and starting to feel like fall, and Thanksgiving is coming. And so it's that kind of, this is one of my favorite times of year. I actually like the rain. I'm the guy that walks around without an umbrella. So
no,
yeah.
it helps me focus at work. It keeps me tuned into work because outside it's just that kind of pitter patter. It's like reading a book, I guess.
Well, you're not going to be on the golf course.
No,
and you're not going to be swimming. So, it's definitely time to get inside, hunker down, and get some work done.
Sure.
So I think what I'd like to talk about today is going to be commercial assets, which is an area that I have quite a bit of experience in, and our company has a lot of experience in. So I want to talk about selling high-dollar assets in the area of construction equipment. Also talk about oil field equipment. We do live in Texas, a big oil state, gas production. And we're actually our office, which is on the first floor. If you were to get on the elevator and go upstairs, you would be in the Atmos Energy headquarters. So we are definitely in the area of oil and gas in North Dallas, and so we have a connection to oil and gas all the time. It seems like we're always doing business with someone that's in the oil and gas business, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So
it's something we've been not necessarily dodging on this show, but it's surprising we haven't got around to it yet. Like for all the talking we've been doing about auction in Texas.
Well, we did talk about a few weeks ago, or say a month ago, we did an auction for an independent auction company that we are working with on all their real estate, and this is a company called Permian, and Permian International is an energy asset auction company. So they primarily sell oil field equipment, and they're an upstart. A gentleman named Steve Taylor joined us at our auction school here 2 or 3 years ago, and we have since become really good friends. And so when he has an auction with his company, he likes to have me come and call the auction. So I guess you could say right now I'm kind of the principal auctioneer, which
Sure.
I've done for other companies, and I don't mind doing that. I don't do it a lot because it takes me a little bit away from United Real Estate, United SCS, Strategic Client Services, but the fact that we have a strategic relationship between the two companies. So United SCS, if in fact Permian has an auction for real estate or has some real estate to sell, then they're going to call me, and we're going to take care of that. We actually did. We've done a couple of auctions in the last year or so. We sold a ranch in Midland, about 7 miles from downtown Midland, and we did that. I guess about maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And then a little while back, we did a restaurant equipment auction for a friend of Steve's, and that was in between Ruidoso and Roswell, New Mexico, and it was the historic Tinnie Steakhouse. And that was an example of a Texas oil man and his wife or ex-wife who had an asset that they had. There was a dream, one of those dream deals where hey, we ought to buy that steakhouse and we'll run it, and that'll be fun, and it was until they got a divorce. And then,
it's a
it wasn't
harsh
funny.
ending to that story. Yes.
Then it wasn't fun anymore.
No.
And so anyway, Steve recommended me for the auction, and we went out to New Mexico and Tinnie, New Mexico, and conducted this auction. And to give you an example, there was a situation where you had a historic building. It did have some deferred maintenance, but it looked really good, and it was filled with antiques, and it had a liquor license. And in New Mexico, See, these are the things that you learn over the years.
Sure.
When you're in the real estate and the auction business or traditional sales, the liquor license that you just can't go, to the state house and say, hey, I need a liquor license. They simply do not issue liquor licenses. They issue liquor licenses that exist. So you have to purchase an existing liquor license, which really makes a liquor license a premium in New Mexico. And so, as it turned out, the liquor license for the Tinnie Steakhouse was actually worth more than the steakhouse itself.
Which is wild. It's like one of those taxi cab medals in New York. Like
It's like a permit that's worth a bunch of money. And so our marketing department focused on looking for. And here's the other piece of this pie that is a little unusual. Tinnie, New Mexico, honestly, is kind of in the middle of nowhere.
if you didn't know by the name,
yeah. So you drive halfway between the two towns, and you really don't see anything except some signs, and you look forward to the next place you can stop. Tinnie barely had a place to stop.
And that steakhouse.
That steakhouse is pretty much it. And so, it made it a little interesting on finding that buyer that is going to be interested in being in Tinnie, New Mexico. So as it turned out, we did do the auction. We sold the building and contents. Excuse me. And then we did the license, and then we put it together and offered it as a whole. Someone could have come in and bought the building and the liquor license, but that's not how it turned out,
Right.
Which is kind of unusual. I mean, normally if you're going to buy something like that, you're going to want all of it. But the folks that bought the structure had their first. He owned a construction company, and they had their first date at the Tinnie Steakhouse.
Aww.
And subsequently, every anniversary they had dinner at the Tinnie Steakhouse, and so they had a love for the structure, and were not really interested in the liquor license. And so I think their idea was to make it a bed and breakfast, and then it was kind of a BYOB thing. You could bring your own wine if you wanted to, and I think they were probably going to apply for a wine. A wine permit. But as it turns out, a convenience store chain in Texas that's based in Texas that has a lot of locations in West Texas and Northwest Texas, they bought the liquor license, and they're going to go down the road about a mile or two and put in a brand new convenience store. And so there's your buyer.
Huh.
And that that is a perfect example of how things come together. So Steve calls me, says, hey, Mike, I think this would be a great project for us to do. I go, Steve, I think you're right. Let's do it. I got on a plane, flew out there, took my team. We looked at it, went back to Dallas, started the marketing process. I contacted our local United Country real estate office out in New Mexico. Named Charles Bennett. Charles Bennett, been a friend of mine for many years. He actually came through our America's Auction Academy. He represented our company as the broker of record, and then I went out and called the sale, and the marketing process worked, and everything worked just exactly the way it was meant to be, how things are supposed to work.
Yeah.
You have a group, you have a group work together as a team. You have a marketing department, our Enhanced Marketing Services in Kansas City. They did all the marketing for us, and then we got on the phone and started looking for buyers, and Charles did the same out in New Mexico. So it was a win-win. The sellers got out, and they were satisfied with the price, and the buyers were happy because they got what they wanted. And like I say, happy buyer, happy seller.
Sure.
And so that's an example of what can happen.
So walk me through. I know we're kind of getting off topic from oil auctions. I'm curious.
We're coming back.
Right. Are those any different from any other auction? I mean, at the end of the day, it still ends with your auctioneer on a stage, and you got your bid callers, and they're watching everything.
Yep.
But you're selling large equipment, right? You can't bring it up on stage and say, hey, here's this cat construction earth mover we've got, or what have you.
Yeah. There's two types of sales. So you have a large company out that's an international company. They've got about 46 locations worldwide where you actually do drive the equipment through. Okay?
Sure.
And they also have online sales, so you don't have to go to the auction. You can bid online if you want to. We are doing something different. We're not driving the equipment anywhere. So when we had our auction in Wyoming here about a month ago, We go to a hotel ballroom. You have the convenience of hotel rooms. You have a restaurant. You have all the amenities for the buyers. It's a comfortable place to be. You don't have to sit out or stand out in the sun and go through all of that torture, which I've done many times.
Sure.
But anyway, and then we basically are selling the assets by slide or video. So it's either going to be a slide or a video show of each piece of equipment. So in some cases it's video where you'll actually show the machine driving, running, the hydraulics working, the engine running, whatever you need to do to promote it. Most people do this. Most of them will do a slideshow and just click and go through. And also offer online bidding, simulcast bidding. So like when we did the sale up in Wyoming, we had a couple of hundred people in the room and we had a couple of hundred people online. And so we're monitoring the bids as they come in. And quite frankly, if you look at our Texans Can Cars for Kids sale that we do, Texans Can Cars for Kids, it's almost the same principle. You've got people in front of you and you got people online, and we're just taking those bids as they come in, whether they're on the floor or online. So very little difference in it, just a different asset class. But I think the key here is having knowledge. If you're going to hire a company to sell your construction company or your oil field services company, you need people who have knowledge of equipment. And so that's what we have between United, SCS, Strategic Client Services, our United Country team, our United Auction Services team up in Kansas City. And then if we're doing oil field equipment, then of course I'm going to consult with my guys at Permian because they are quickly becoming the leader in the business. And so by the time we get through with the next auction, which is coming up in Midland, Odessa, we will have done another $5-6 million auction.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's coming up really quick. The one we did up in Wyoming, was they were hoping for around $6 million, and I think they did close to $9 million. And for a company's first sale, that tells you they know the equipment, they know the buyers, and they know the sellers.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's fantastic. And so I was very proud to kick off that company as the auctioneer and looking forward to the next one. Now, the first sale that we did with them went a lot longer than what we had planned. Ended up turning into be a 12-hour auction. And I probably sold, out of 12 hours, I probably sold 9 hours, which is a long sale for me.
I thought you were going to say 9 items.
9.
Wow, Mike, that's impressive.
Yeah, I sold that first 9, then I called it a day.
Called it out,
That's right. I'm
Sure.
a rock star. Not. And so
it's impressive, 9 hours.
It was a long time.
Yeah.
But the thing that I'm proud of is the fact that, and if you were, in fact, you could actually go to our McGavel, Mike McGavel Jones website or Facebook page, and you could actually watch the whole video of that auction. And as part of that, as an auctioneer, you want to be as strong at the end as you are in the beginning.
Oh, sure.
And so that's my goal. Is I don't want the first 2 hours to look great, and then the last 2 hours they're like, man, that guy's wore out.
We're looking at 9 hours. You got a stool up there? You got to have something to lean on.
We're seated, usually seated. I mean, sometimes I'll stand up for a while.
Well, yeah.
Because you just, your back gives out, and the older you get, your back really gives out. But no, it's good. I just like I love the business, so it's, if you love it, it's easier than if it's a job.
Ain't that the truth?
And the other thing, when you're doing it, when you're selling equipment, every piece of equipment is different. So it's not like some of the cars that you sell where you sell the same type of car over and over and over and over, because that can get a little monotonous, and that's why I don't mind the bid calling for the car sale on Saturday, because it's only 2 or 3 hours, and there is a vast difference between a $400 Kia, and selling a 56 Jeep. So
yeah, sure.
You just don't know. And every week's a new week. You never know what you're going to be selling. So that's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the oil field stuff. A lot of people go, well, Mike Jones has been in the business 40-something years, but, he does charity sales and he sells a few cars and he sells a piece of real estate every once in a while. Well, that's a misnomer. People don't realize that when I got out of auction school, I went to work for a company called Acme Auctions. And Acme Auctions was a couple of gentlemen, Travis Somerville and Buddy Gandelin, and they had started Acme Auctions at the Gainesville Airport up north of Dallas. And they started this company that really was very specific in the oil field business. They didn't really concentrate on drilling rigs or platforms or things of that nature. I'm not saying they wouldn't sell them, but that wasn't their focus. There were other companies that focused heavily on that. They focused on fishing and rental tools, and the average person in the world has no idea what a fishing or rental tool is. But these are different components that are used for different things that happen when you're drilling. And we were selling elevators and slips and tongs, and which means nothing. That's nomenclature in that business, but not for the average human being that pumps a gallon of gas. And so I got an education very young. So I was around 19 or 20 when I started working for Acme, and Acme was a great source of information for me and knowledge. And being around that type of client, you start learning how the oil field works. Now, I'd already been introduced to the oil field by my grandfather, who'd worked in it since the 30s. My mother worked for an oil company when I was born. She was in Wichita Falls, and so you tend to lean towards things that you're used to, what you know. And my grandfather was, he'd done everything from being a tool pusher to chemical sales and pretty much anything related to being on a rig.
Those small town Texas upbringings, right? Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like the heyday of oil in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was probably working on rigs in the 30s, in his 20s. And of course, he's been gone now for 30 years, and so he passed at 72, and that was 30 years ago. So he'd be over 100 years old if he could have made it. But no, he was in the oil field. But almost everybody in North Texas, depending on their level of education and what they were doing, they ended up in the oil field, and they might be working a rig or whatever. But it reminds me, and I have a really good friend up in Michigan who's a big Detroit Lions fan. David Helmer is a great guy. He's an auctioneer, but he loves sports and he loves to get autographs. And in fact, he would send me cards every once in a while that were autographed by some famous players that I like. But anyway, my grandfather worked with a guy named Harley Sewell, and Harley Sewell was from St. Joe, Texas, which is where my grandfather and my mother were born. And so Harley Sewell, he worked on the rigs during the off season, but during the season, Harley Sewell played for the Detroit Lions, and because in those days, NFL players didn't make any money, and so Harley would come back home to St. Joe and go back to the oil fields of Texas and try to make a living. So it's just kind of interesting, and of course he's revered in Detroit as one of the greatest Detroit Lion players of all time, Harley Sewell. You can look him up. So anyway, that's kind of how we migrated to the oil area. And then my stepdad, he was with Halliburton. Well, Halliburton, one of the biggest oil services company in the world, probably the largest still. And so even in that situation, I went to high school in Houston, so a lot of our friends worked for Schlumberger or Halliburton or Otis Engineering or the big companies like Chevron and so forth, Exxon. So that's kind of how it was. Everybody was connected to oil and gas somehow, some way.
Right.
And I remember when I was in junior achievement in high school, which was junior achievement, or a lot of people remember junior achievement. It's still around. It's just a different deal, but it teaches youth the free enterprise system and how to do sales and how to run a company. And I was president of Southeast Texas when I was in high school, and so had some great experiences there. But I just remember that Bayreuth, which was a big company, and they were our sponsor for our group, and you saw a lot of that. So anyway, back to the story. Finished up with Acme, did that for 2 or 3 years. I learned quite a bit about oil field, fishing and rental tools, and then we did migrate to the mid-'80s, and we had our own oil field yard where we sold construction equipment and rigs and platforms and derricks and pretty much anything and everything related to oil field equipment. So I think at the end of the day, Zach, I just want to let people know that if you own a company or if there's multiple reasons people have auctions, okay? It could be because maybe the economy's bad. or the oil business is shrinking in certain areas. A lot of times oil field equipment can be sold not because they are wanting to go out of business, but because they don't want to have to invest in new equipment or updated equipment. So based on profit and loss and what their net revenues are, that may be the determining factor of whether they want to sell off an entire yard of equipment. They may be going, look, we were making $8 million, or let's say we're making $3 million a month in this yard, and then we wake up one day and the market has changed, and now we're making $1 million a month, and our model doesn't support $1 million a month, and so the overhead doesn't justify the operation, and that's kind of what happened in Rock Springs, Wyoming. They simply, the math didn't work for them, and so they said, we're just going to close the yard, and so that's what they did. So don't always assume that when you see somebody closing something or selling something off or shutting down that it means they're broke. And it can be just a decision on assets, because they were going to have to make a major investment of new equipment in order to make that a profitable center. And so death is a reason to sell your company. Divorce can be one of the reasons. Maybe you just need to sell off some equipment. But whatever that reason is, all I would say is if you're a company owner, if you're an attorney that represents a group, if you are into a bankruptcy situation, or you can prevent bankruptcy by selling off assets, if you're operating a fund, or you're an investment supervisor for someone, maybe you are making financial decisions for someone that has given you that authority. If you need to sell anything related to the oil field or construction equipment, road equipment, trucks, trailers, any asset that's a commercial asset that would be deemed of that type, whether it's a oil field yard, it could be excess land. It could be commercial land that someone needs to move. So if you're into construction, oil field related services, road, it could be road construction, we certainly would be happy to talk to you about that. And so United SES, which I'm the president of, would be happy to talk to you about your asset. You can send an email to me at mike@united- S as in Sam, that's SCS, Sam, Charlie, Sam.com. And my number is 214-906-5265, 214-906-5265, if you'd like to talk to me directly. And also, any conversations that I have with you will be of the highest confidentiality. We believe in fair consultation. We don't take every project, but we'll be direct with you. We'll tell you what we think. We'll come up with some numbers that work for you or will not work for you. And if we can work for you and help you solve a situation with assets that need to be sold, we'll be certainly happy to do that. Just like our auction that we just did in Utah 3 weeks ago, where we sold 120 properties in one day. Whether it's one property or 120 properties, we can handle it. So whether it's one rig, 20 tractor trailers, it could be excavators, it could be loaders, it could be tractors, it could be farm equipment. Anything of the commercial nature, we're certainly interested in talking to you. So, Zach, I think that's going to wrap us up today. And thank you for producing the show.
Happy to help.
And, if you need me, call me. That's all I'm going to tell you. That's right. From Dallas, Texas, the Mike McGavel Jones Show, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. God bless. Be safe.